So basically on this first one, I mean, the animal waste one, Catherine, it's just 7B that we're looking to add in?
Yes, and they changed in the
Right,
section
and to
5.
take out the other animals in the other.
Yes, because
section.
it's all dogs, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden we have this one sentence here.
Got it.
Yes, and then go to the new section, and we can add on to the animal.
Hi.
Sarah, how you doing?
Hang on a minute.
Are you actually excited by this meeting?
I just figured I should stay in the loop.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it, definitely.
Catherine, there's different test types in here for the sewer. Is that just like who put the wording in, or?
No, it's, the document that we're inputting in was originally a WordPerfect from a long time
So
ago.
it's just,
So it will not.
a software thing?
Yeah, it
Okay.
will not format correctly, like it will put, it's all Times Roman, however, it comes out crunched in places and then the way you want it, and you can't fix it.
Okay. I know, I just wasn't sure if there were certain things that were put in by the department and certain things
No.
put in by Oliver.
No.
Okay.
No, it's just a very, very old document, we probably should retype it, the whole thing.
And these are all changes recommended by Oliver?
No, Oliver Associates has the ordinance, like, in order to reduce the cost for Oliver from $2,400 a month to $1,500 a month, I had to do some additional work.
Okay.
So I did this as a first draft for them to look over, understanding the issues that have come up over the years. Most of them we've resolved well, but, you know, but we haven't had any regulation behind us to do it.
Okay.
And then depending on what we think is good or bad, you know, things that we think are too much or not enough, or, you know, should be left the same, Oliver Associates has this document and is going through it, and then they'll make changes.
Okay. So this is just the first pass
Yes,
for this?
yes.
Okay. Are you all set to?
Yes, we're all set.
Okay. All right, counselors, welcome to the Tuesday, September 8th meeting of the Ordinance Committee for the town of Pittsfield. First item on business is roll call. So tonight we have Matt Bolster, counselor, member of the Ordinance Committee. We have Pete Lodgedice, member of the Ordinance Committee and town counselor. Amanda Collmore, counselor, Heather Donahue, counselor, member of the Ordinance Committee, and Catherine Ruth, our town manager. Under old business, municipal ban on pesticide application. As far as I know, we have not pursued that with anything else. We haven't taken that up.
No, because there was so much going on, you had mentioned that it needed further research and you were working on your notes and everything.
Yeah, I think we should probably wait until the Parks and Rec committee has a little more time to get organized and maybe tackle that in the spring.
Yeah.
When they have time to look at that.
The only thought that I had is we've got that solar company that is gonna do the solar out on Main Street, or was intending to. And so I think they're only looking to cut the grass twice a year, was it? You remember?
I think it was twice, yeah.
So I'm assuming they're gonna be using other means, but maybe not.
I would think they would just they'll just probably brush hog it in between.
They said they were only gonna do it twice a year in their presentation to the,
Yeah, but that would probably still work with how high those are off the ground. They didn't mention pesticides.
they didn't mention any pesticides, but I would assume that somebody would have to do some kind of control. but
If
maybe not.
if it hasn't been designated as wetlands, then they can do that. If there's an area that is on the map as wetlands,
Oh,
then
that's
they're
why.
not supposed to be
Yeah.
using pesticides.
No, that's probably why then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was never brought up.
Even if it's not designated as wetlands, it's really close to wetlands.
It
Like
looks
that
like
whole
it.
area on that, let's say, southern half of that lot,
Mhm.
and around the back side is all wet, like
Mhm.
year-round
Mhm.
wet.
They actually had to move 2 solar panels because they were encroaching on that protected land.
Yeah, yeah, it's very wet in there.
Definitely some of it is wetlands.
Yeah, and depending on the year, most of it can be wetlands. Not this year.
So maybe that's not even an issue.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it would be an issue. Most people that have fields that, they just, mow to keep open
Yeah.
might brush hog it twice a year,
Yeah.
rather than having to do it. And for the purpose that they have, they don't really need to keep it closely cropped.
Right.
But some people will put sheep on there and graze sheep underneath there too, so
Mhm.
maybe they gotta get a herder sheep.
Yeah.
So are we good with waiting and dealing with that when we have a little more, when the Parks and Rec Committee kinda has less things on their plate, and since they're trying to get budget stuff together and
Yeah.
Yep.
whatnot? Okay. So we'll, deal with that in the spring. Item number B, under old business, chapter 6, offenses, miscellaneous, article 7, dogs, and article 7B, horses. And we have some proposed language.
So this is the issue of the manure along the roadway, and originally we tried to fit into Article 7, which is all about dogs, a section that indicates other animals under Section 704, animal waste, on page 6-4 at the bottom. However, this language has been in here for many years, and the town has tried to utilize that language to follow up on issues that have happened with horses and a mule in the past. And basically, these items could not be enforced because this is all about dogs. And then the issue went away until recently. So it's proposed that in this section on dogs, we leave this as dogs and take out or other animals in both sections under 704, and then go on and create a new section. 7A is stray cats. That's been in there since the beginning of time. So we would create a new section on page 6-6 at the bottom, Article 7B, horses. And then that would deal with the issue as best as one can. Now, the concern at this point is what about all the other animals that could be an issue? We have to be reasonable about this. It's hard to control animals, but there have been some particular issues over the years with a mule, and I believe it was a sheep once. So you'd have to determine if you wanted to put other animals there, and then just leave it at that, and then list out some, but not to be just those animals, so it says other animals. But how far do you want to go?
What if we said like livestock or something like that? Like, I'm thinking like milking cows or something like that, other donkeys, I don't know. I'm not a farmer, so I don't know.
What if you called the Article 7, instead of calling it dogs, you called it animals? And then you had a section A for dogs, because you have different licensing rules, and then your next section for cats, and then horses if you need to, but then you can have animal waste be under all animals instead of under the heading of dogs.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so Article 7 says dogs and talks about
Right, but I'm
Every
saying
time.
instead of having it called dogs, you have a 7A. I know it's cats right now, but you can move that around. 7A would be dogs, but the heading for section 7 would be animals. So it's generally all animals, and then you can have a section near that that just says waste. And then it covers all animals, dogs, cats, chicken poop, livestock. Then you save time, you don't have to come back and edit it every time a new animal issue comes up.
Well, I think we'd have to change the entire Article 7 dogs, because it's only about dogs. And
Well, what I'm
licensing.
saying though, Catherine, is you take that and call it Article 7 dogs, and then under Article 7 animals, and then under Article 7 you have, like you have with cats, Article 7A. Then you can call this section 7A01 for definitions, under dogs. And then 7A02 for running at large, just do it like you did for stray cats. But then you have that section 704 could become 701, I guess, and put that as animal waste. Then it's not under dogs. People can't argue it, it's under animals generally. And you just have that, you're just kind of shifting everything down a little bit.
I kind of like that because it makes it more broad and you don't have to keep coming back with every little thing.
So we would say Article 7, animals.
Right.
On 6-3.
Yeah.
And then from animals, you bring it down to dogs, cats.
Yep, 7A dogs, 7B cats. If you need something else with horses, I suppose you could leave that, but you could call it livestock instead of horses. But all of the animal waste stuff, instead of having to have it under each section for dogs, cats, horses, livestock, or whatever, you just have it generally under a heading of animals.
Animals and then waste and then
Animals, animal waste, whatever the fines are that
not
go
on
along
their
with
own
that.
property.
Yeah, not on your own property.
property.
And so that covers every animal that would ever be thought of.
If I was walking my goat,
That does happen.
that would be covered underneath that. Though I can't imagine trying to pick up goat poop.
All right, so we'll have a definition section, then we'll go into dogs, then we'll go into cats, then we'll go into livestock. All right, that's gonna leave out the chickens and all the miscellaneous other animals, which is fine.
Well, they'd be covered.
Well, they'd be covered under
If-
animals.
If you call it animals or livestock, then it would be covered under that.
All right, I'll rewrite the whole thing here. All right, I'll come up with something rewriting the whole section 7.
Is there a way just to take the animal waste part out of section 7 and put it, like make it, I don't know, is there a way to insert it at the beginning?
That's what
Under-
I was
maybe
suggesting.
under-
That's what,
Like, instead of calling it section 7 dogs, you call it section 7 animals, and then right underneath that is where animal waste goes. And then you start anything that's specific to dogs, anything specific to cats.
And then we don't even need the horse part.
Right, unless you wanted to include something about livestock, but since there's nothing in here originally, I don't think we need that additional section.
we can, what with the animals, you can do animal/livestock for your.
Well, part of the issue here is that dogs and cats tend to roam free.
Mhm.
In general, livestock does not. Obviously, every once in a while, someone's where they're not supposed to be, but in general, people don't just let their livestock
You
wander
never
about.
experienced that.
Never. And I think that's the difference in having dogs and cats singled out in the ordinances. And plus, there's the whole dog licensing issue
Correct.
versus licensing your horses
Correct.
or
Right.
something like that. And the issue about rabies as well. And there's a difference between you know, dogs and cats, when people are walking them on leashes or something, they provide some type of control on the sidewalks and things like that, versus the horse ordinance, they're pretty much strictly on the roadway. And so that's where the deposits are being made, or they're standing in a parking lot if they're doing business somewhere. So there's a little bit of a difference, you know, they're not like on the sidewalks, like, somebody could be walking their dog and they leave something behind, or on somebody else's lawn. So there's a difference in, how the animals are managed, or even managed. I mean, there's a lot of stray cats out there that nobody has any control over.
My neighborhood's full of them.
Yeah,
We don't have a big mice problem though.
no, it is a benefit. So I think that's the biggest difference in why dogs and cats are, you know, singled out. And historically, you know, dogs and cats were the things that you needed to control, not people's horses, because they, you know, their horses are valuable to them as a mode of transportation, so they have control of those animals.
All right, so we'll have Article 7, animals. We'll have a section on dogs, cats, and then other animals. Not calling them livestock. We'll have a new definition, and I'll work on this.
I see there's a section under the dogs about noise complaints. Do we need to include the other animals in that too? I'm just thinking if somebody has like a donkey or something in town and it's, you know.
Actually,
why
there's
would
already
we-
ordinances dealing with that because you're not even allowed to have those in town. In
Oh.
town limits.
I didn't see anything here that says you can't.
We have had the donkey issue with the properties close by as soon as you got out into the country. We were on national TV a while back. But we don't change the ordinance just because of one item, but you're correct, that could, you could have other animals making a lot of noise.
Yeah, it's not a problem, we don't need to include it, I was just thinking while we're editing this
Yeah.
already.
Like
it
move
needs to
that
be-
into the general animals area.
Yeah.
Other animals, no, that's correct.
So Matt, you want the noise disturbances prohibited, complaint and notice to abate and penalty, all of that under the general animal section along with the animal waste, 703 and 704 be moved?
I think it might be a good idea just to cover a little broader of animal species, I don't know how to word it, but.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right, I'll rewrite all of this and send it out. This is sort of a miscellaneous ordinance that has a variety of items in it.
Did we wanna, so the horse part that is suggested here would not be needed because it would be covered under the other animals
We're
part?
gonna do other animals.
So that would be stricken.
I would think we'd want the fines to be consistent too, not different fines for different animals.
Right. I mean, it's a $200 offense for a horse
Yeah, so
for a time, and it's only 75 for a dog.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because the issue will always be trying to enforce these things. We've had
Well, that's what I was
dog
gonna bring
cases,
up.
dog cases where we've been subpoenaed into court and sat there all day over, which are usually neighborhood disputes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally, I don't think it's necessary for this, and I do think it's a waste of our officers' time to be enforcing these when there's other things that they need to be doing. But obviously, if someone's dog is uncontrolled you know, we have an animal control officer to work with them on that as well as the stray cats. But, I mean,
There is a gap with the other animals, but that's always existed everywhere.
Right.
And you just do the best you can. The animal control officer will go out even though they don't cover those animals. The police officer will go out. Sometimes the town manager goes out, other people go out, you know, the neighbors go out. It's just, generally, if it happens just once, it's fun, you know, you just take care of it. It's the habitual ones that's the issue.
right.
And they are rare.
Okay. Anything else on Article 7, counselors? So, Catherine, you'll work on those at some point in between all the other things we're throwing at you.
Yes, I'll rework that.
Okay. Okay, Chapter 9, Sewer Use Ordinance. Entire ordinance. This will be an easy one, right?
Yes, so you have a copy of draft number 1 for the ordinance committee meeting this evening, chapter 9, sewer use. So, in researching different sewer ordinances, originally this was going to be an item that all of our associates was going to take care of for us. However, the cost of the services was $2,400 a month, and to reduce the cost to $1,500 a month, we said we would take care of some of the items. I would write the different items, do the letters, and I did the ordinance. So I took the ordinances that I found online, and either any sewer ordinances you could find were well over 100 pages, or they were similar to ours, you know, about 20 pages long. I found there's 2 versions of the ordinances, the huge ones that you can't even understand, and are too wieldy for us to utilize, which are huge. And then a variety of towns had an ordinance similar to ours with the same setup and almost in places the same language, and sometimes the same language. There were a number of towns, Jay, Camden, and there were 3 or 4 others, and so they had an ordinance that was set up like ours that came in the 70s, and they had updated theirs because of, you know, a lot of growth and everything. Ours, we had issues over the years, but we would take care of them. Sometimes we didn't have the regulation we needed, but we worked it out. So I went through the ordinances that were similar to ours and picked up some of the language and created other language that deals with all the issues that we've had. And so we can go down through this page by page, but not through, you know, explicit detail, but a little bit, just to show you the changes. So everything that is stricken out is to be taken out. Everything that is underlined in bold is to be added. So the first thing that I learned is that all the departments seem to be part of the Public Works Department back in the 1970s. So I had Department of Public Works, which I'm sure wouldn't be interested in running the sewer facilities. So looking at some of our other regulations and permits on 9.2, I put down the department shall be called the Water Pollution Control of the Town, also known as Sewer Department Enterprise Fund. So these are all the names that we have. So we took care of that. We've got a whole variety of definitions that match up with the other towns on their ordinances that still seem to be in the state law and other locations and regulations and everything. So the next item I found was on 9.4, where it says superintendent. Now, at this point, we do not have a superintendent, may have one in the future. So I just changed the language, so where it says superintendent shall mean the superintendent of the water pollution control of the town, or the town's authorized deputy, employee, agent, or representative. Because it could be the engineering firm, it could be the plant manager, there could be an assistant or deputy, there could be a superintendent. So that covers everything. On to page 9.5 in Article 2, all of the ordinances had a section on private sewage disposal, because this was handling not only the sewer, but also in the town areas where there is private sewerage. And so most of the ordinances referred to the mean surface wastewater disposal rules, so I added that into section 201. And then in section 202, any place as we update our ordinances, it has the fee listed. I've been changing the language, if I can, to the fee will be based on the current fee structure as adopted by the town council by order. Because you adopt fees by order, then we don't have to go back and change the ordinance all the time.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
And you can see that this one hasn't been changed for a while because it's $5.
$5.
Yeah, I wish it was still that.
Yeah.
On 9.6, page 9.6, I did put in a section here, and this is in another part of the ordinance and always known, although not enforced, because the council has said that we won't force the people to hook up unless they have a problem with their septic system. But I did put in language that matched up with the other ordinances. It said at such time as a public sewer becomes available to a property served by a private sewerage disposal system, connection shall be made to the public sewer in compliance with this ordinance, and that any septic tanks, cesspools, or similar private sewerage disposal facilities shall be abandoned and filled with suitable material. And that matches up with the next section, which does allow exemptions for that. Because if somebody has a system and they're, let's say, on a side road and we bring the sewer down, if their system's working properly, why would you force them to, get rid of it, hook up to the sewer and pay all this money? So the town has, over the years, had a requirement that if they're within 100 feet of the property, they're supposed to hook up. But people have come in and talked to the counselors, and this was something that went on in the 80s and 90s a lot, and just said they didn't want to hook up. We had their system checked out at that time, and then they weren't required to do it.
Are we able to add to this and cite that other passage, except by exception and passage XYZ, just so that it's clear here? Because this is just saying that you do have to hook up.
Right, and you do have to, but there's a part where this says there's an exception below. I mean, we can add the same language to both.
Or just cite C, section 30 whatever, if there's an exception.
To make
or
sure there's
exception.
absolutely no issue, we can do that.
Otherwise, we're saying one thing in one paragraph and something else in another paragraph.
Right, which then gives an exception.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Well, something that comes to mind too is the new pharmacy that they're looking at putting in.
Pardon?
That's on a piece of property that has a sewer on it, and I think there was a debate on whether they were gonna tie into.
There was, and they decided to rightly that they would hook into the sewer system.
Oh, they did, okay.
Yes. In fact, I put that down so I could bring that up at the council meeting so you would know about it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so Walgreens had talked about just hooking into the septic system, which is, I understand there'll be a drive-through and not much traffic and everything, restrooms, but, anyone that's gonna have a business or something that's gonna have some traffic or could expand in the future, if you get a chance to hook into the sewer system, you should just do it.
Mm.
So that's been taken care of. We can make this so it's a little bit clearer here. But they're supposed to hook up within 90 days if the public sewer is brought within 100 feet of their property line. And I did put in that if excavation of the public highway was prohibited, they wouldn't have to. And this is where we get into, once Route 100 is redone, it'll be a 5-year moratorium. So there's no way anyone could ever hook into it, for 5 years, unless they got an exception, which is very difficult to get.
So this requires hookup within 90 days? If a sewer project is finished, say, in November, their 90 days would run into like January, February.
Yeah, it says after date of official notice, which I would assume that anyone, would understand that, let's say you got the sewer and in October, November, nobody's gonna be able to hook up or should be hooking up during the winter. It would be after official notice, which is the language that's been in there. So far, we haven't had, the period of time I've been here, we've had no issues with this. If somebody malfunctioned, we would tell them they had to hook up, and they would do it. But other than that, if they haven't malfunctioned, what's the purpose of making them spend money?
And this is at the expense of the homeowner or the landowner?
That would be correct, yes. Usually people want to hook up to the sewer system to get out of their problems.
I wish I had that option at the Palmyra property.
Mm-hmm.
420-foot well.
So I can work on this a little bit more to match it up better.
So the underlined part there is it repeating the? I'm gonna change the pages here. Oh, it talks about subdivision, okay.
Yeah, I put it in both because it was in both in the other ordinances.
Oh, I see, some of the language is the same, it's just referring to subdivision versus.
Yes, and then you got your part of the subdivision. So this is a particular item that has come up before with the Layton subdivision, which now apparently has a new name and a new owner, in which if the sewer system goes by and they would prefer to do septic systems, but let's say the sewer system was within 500 feet from the back area, and we said you have to hook up. There is an exception here, you know, in case they had a compelling story that the septic systems would work properly. But this is an item that we would have to match up with the subdivision ordinance also.
Which is gonna be looked at by the planning board.
Correct, so this would be an item that, I've checked that one out, but I think there needs to be a language change there. One of the items that people keep bringing up is that we require them to do all these full utilities, so they can't afford to build the properties. So perhaps if they had cluster housing and they had tiny housing, they could use a septic system, a larger one for a few properties, under the state law requirements, and not be required to do the sewer system. It just gives a few options. And of course, all language, if we agree with certain premises, all language would be checked out legally to make sure it says what we think it says. All right, going on to payment for use of public sewers. From all the ordinances I looked at, our section was very tiny here. And so I added on because we have had situations come up when different companies wanted to move to town, and they said, well, look, we'll hook to your sewer system. You can just charge us extra money. And it wasn't legal to do that. And in those cases, we didn't want it. We didn't actually want that type of sewerage because it might have damaged our system. But let's say we have a type of sewerage that could be treated and just cost more money, would work with our system, but just had a different, the volume was a lot, or the suspended solids was more, it's supposed to be, or a certain type. Then this would allow the council to assess, after an engineer looked at this, a higher sewer rate to take care of the town's costs in dealing with that sewerage. If you want to.
The ability to charge.
The ability, it says may. It doesn't mean we're gonna take it, it's just may.
So that allows us to work with a business that might wanna come into town that might have some limitations.
Yes. And then this next item, if just cause can be shown on abating, that was a policy at the end of the sewer ordinance currently, and has been in effect for many decades. So I just put it into this section instead of having it attached to the back. Now, one other item that comes into play here that you'll see under the water, which is a bit more complicated, is that with the mobile homes, we never had an issue until the last few years. Somebody might live in mobile home A, they have all these bills due and they move to mobile home B. Well, we take their bills and move them with them. However, the PUC has stated we can't do that. So the bills are outstanding, and then you can't assess them against the landlord because their names aren't on there. So we might need some language in here that would deal with if somebody moves from property to property. We've had 2 people do this and avoid their bills.
Isn't the bill their bill though, not the bill to the property? I mean, it's issued at that
Well,
address.
that's what we
but-
thought too, but we were ordered by the
Their bill.
PUC, we were ordered by the PUC to start a new account for them, and we could not require them to pay their old bill.
Oh, okay, in order to get new service.
Yes, or at all.
Really?
Wait, you
Yes.
couldn't, they owe you for the debt.
Oh, it was
What?
very
You
irking.
can't take them to small claims for it?
With the amount of documentation that people had and when these things were done years ago, not on those particular items, we might be able to now.
Hmm.
Yeah. You can't put a lien on, by the way it was set up at that time. Now you can, but I thought we might not need to put some language in here. When you get to the water terms and conditions, you'll see something. But this is, the PUC, it only comes into effect for water, not sewer. So we might be able to create some language there that deals with that. I had not seen that before. All that we would do is that we would require, in order for the property to be used, that, let's say there were bills on that property, we would require them to be paid up before they got their service. And that worked good for many, many years until recently. And then we were told we can't do that. So we have some outstanding bills. So that's something that I'll try to figure out what to do with, if there's something we can add in the sewer ordinance that we can do for sewer but not water.
Holy cow.
It's rare when somebody can figure this out and actually do something like that. Normally everybody pays their bills. All right, so going on to page 9-8, section 502, the permit fees are all listed in here for the different items. So I said the fee, again, shall be based on the current fee schedules adopted by the town council by order to get them out of the actual ordinance.
Does that need to be bolded and underlined? Is that a new statement?
It is on mine, but I think that I didn't get it on the other one. So yes, that would be added in.
Okay.
So it's the same language. The fee shall be based on the current fee schedules adopted by the town council by order. Yes, using this old word perfect 2.0.
Lots of limitations with that program.
2.0 word perfect here was not fun, but it was quicker than trying to retype the whole thing. And then I saw in some of the other ordinances, and this is something that could happen as areas of town are developed or as commercial moves in from Somerset Plaza, you could have residential service and then a business starts up in the residence. And it would be good for the town to know what's going on and what type of sewage is going into the system. I think it would be rare that there would be an issue. The next item deals with gravity sewer extensions.
Catherine, before you move on, if somebody does have a home and we changed our home business ordinances last year and the year before, so that we could increase the number of home businesses that we have. If someone is doing that, and it becomes a commercial operation in a residential service, they have to have an application before they can have their business located there?
No, for the home occupation and like the resident-based service business one that you have, those wouldn't make the home a commercial entity. It still would be a residential property. So no, it's if the business, let's say you have a residence there, and then everything goes away, it becomes commercial, it becomes industrial, it becomes some other like government or something. But not if they have a little business that they're running in their house, no.
Okay, so
No.
not just the operations of a business, but it's actual, like, the building's removed and something else is
Yeah,
put there.
it becomes something else, like, let's say you had a house and then it becomes the Walgreens,
Okay.
yeah. So it comes up once in a while that somebody will want to hook onto the sewer system and says that, you know, there's no way you can pump it without having it done by gravity, and the town just would not participate in that. So I put that in there. We wouldn't anyway, and the council has always said no, but I put it in the ordinance. And then just to make it clear, as it says in the subdivision ordinance, because once in a while, somebody will indicate that they want the town to pay for all the sewer system or extension to get to a subdivision, like one of the tiny ones, because we haven't had larger ones. I put down the town doesn't participate because that's in the subdivision ordinance, but if it's in the sewer ordinance, then they back each other up. Now, we've told individual businesses if they have a good enough business plan and backing and can match a grant, I mean, we can apply for a grant to the state if something existed. It's rare that it would. The only place we would fall would be community development block grant, and we told them we'll, work with them to see if a grant option would be available to get them the sewer that they need or water. On 9.9, at the top, this has happened once in a while. For commercial or industrial connections, if the sewer manhole is too far away to monitor their flow and to do the testing and everything, we can require that they install their own sewer manhole. And generally, if this is going to take place, it's in the industrial park, and they, on their plans, just put in they're going to have one. So there's not an issue. For recent items, when the brewery went in, they connected directly to a manhole that was out on the facility at the place where they were renting, so that worked out fine. Under section 505, anytime that an old system is looked at, the cost for inspection and testing is paid for by the owner. It just is not in the ordinance, so I put it in there. And then under 506, I copied this out, and this is something that all of our associates would have to look at. There are different versions of how the material should be, but rather than just have the superintendent say, well, it could be this or it could be that, or 2 years later they would say something else, we would put some language in here, but leaving it up to the superintendent, but giving some direction so people would know. And some of this is somewhat reasonable not to have backups, but in our town, with how wet it is, this would be something all of our associates would have to look at to make sure on how it works. And then again, we don't need to have all the language. It might be we just would leave it up to the superintendent. So that was just language that I found in several of the other ordinances that were set up like ours that had been updated over the years, like Camden, for example, J, and there were several others that I looked at. Section 507, for some reason the ordinances had an approved artificial means, which I would see as, like pumping, gravity flow, etc. But I put that in because the other towns' ordinances had artificial. But I think even without it, it means the same thing. Then section 508, just tidying up the language. It says approved by the department. I just put the superintendent because the superintendent was approving everything everywhere. Section 509 talks about the connections being gas tight and water tight, and they should be verified by proper testing. Now, one item we have run into is people will call up at 3:30 Friday afternoon and say, I'm hooking up, it's 4 o'clock tonight, and of course the employees have gone home by that time. So I thought we should put in that it should be at least some notice. Now, currently, if they can go, they just go. But we should try to schedule these during normal working hours if possible. But generally Friday afternoon is when everything starts up, as people haven't called ahead. And if they've called ahead, then we can change the schedules around and everything. Most of the ordinances require 24 hours, some require 3 days, but 24 hours sounded fine in case you had to have somebody else there. The next section, 511. Once in a while, it's rare, but somebody will go to hook in somebody and they just close the road down and people have to, are stuck at the end of a dead-end road or have to drive around. So if possible, they should have one-way traffic. And then the rest of this is different items that I took out of regulations, and I think there's too much here, but some of these make sense that you would have your pavement cut. We've had people go out once in a while, and again, you make rules because somebody doesn't follow them, but you should have your pavement cut, but we've had people use the backhoe and just gouge into the road and the sidewalk. And then there's more cleanup costs, or they leave piles of gravel and take off, and then we have to go straighten that out. So some of this deals with those situations. Other, means you should be using clean gravel. You should have layers that aren't more than 8 inches. Those are in when we do sewer projects. So that's something that all of our associates will need to look at to see how that works. We don't want to be overly regulatory, but we do want to protect the abutters, the citizen who's having the work done, and the town. And then I noticed that we don't have, and so far we've been able to straighten these things out, but we don't actually have backing in case the contractor doesn't want to straighten things out. We've talked them into it, but it would be good to be able to have an ordinance to point to that they do have to clean up the private property, clean up the sidewalk, and again, we'll go out and negotiate with them, but we've had no items that backed us up in doing that. So I took some language from some of the other ordinances, and you can see, I see one where it says shall identify the city. We'll change that to town. We've had the case, and it is rare, but it was in the other ordinances, when somebody dismantled a building and took off leaving the sewer line open, so that then there was a huge water problem. And it needs to be plugged, so that's put into the ordinance. One would not think that would happen, but that has happened. Then the next part, there's 2 sections of the ordinance that conflict, but in legal advice, the part that talks in the ordinance about how the cost of hooking into the sewer main is the responsibility of the individual who owns the property, governs. So I scratched out or crossed out this other part that conflicts with it. And so this is where there's a discussion on where does the line, what does the town own and what does the property owner own regarding the sewer extension to get to the sewer main. So that's something that we need to talk about a little bit more. Chris Pelletier had done some research, plant manager, and found that nearly every town requires that you go to the sewer main, and I am used to that. It says that you will, the town would be responsible for this, but we never have been the whole time I've been here, because they use the other section as the controlling section that indicates the town will incur no cost. So, this is something that needs to be straightened out. So you can think about that.
If someone has a water hookup, the town's responsible to the point where there's the valve, right? And then from the valve
Yes.
on, so logically you would think that the point of the hooking up to the sewer main would be where that responsibility for the town would end, and then after that would be responsibility of the business or the town.
Well, you would
residents.
think that, but the water, you can turn it off, whereas the sewer, you can't. It just flows out into the road.
Mhm.
So there's no sewer tie-off where you
Right.
can stop it, which is why it goes to the main. We did find a couple of towns that would reimburse the citizens or the contractors for doing the work. But this is something that Oliver Associates was asked to look at and to explain out, how should this be done? And what would be the cost if all of a sudden we indicated, we'll just, the town will just take everything from the property line to the road instead of making the citizen responsible for it. Like when I arrived here and within a month had to replace my sewer system, line, I had to go right out into the road. So, that's something all of our associates can explain the pros and cons, but the reason why it's different is because you can turn the water off and then it's over with. but
I
you
was just
can't-
thinking physically of where that line is for water, it's pretty clear, but
Yes.
it sounds like for the sewer that it's not. But
It's not.
with the property line part, then you have to pay to maintain something that's not even on your property. So that would be different than if, like if the sewer main goes down the middle of the road, which some of them do, it seems like a terrible idea.
Most of them do, yeah.
And then, cause then you have a property owner paying to replace all of that and incurring the cost of digging all that up to get to the sewer main, when it would seem that, the town should be maintaining that portion of it until it gets to their property.
It's not an issue in terms of costs until you get to like Somerset Avenue, Heartland Avenue, Main Street. These are the problems.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. On the other roads, it's not really much of an issue.
Right.
Unless
You don't have curving,
unless
you
the
don't
main
have-
line's across the road,
Mm.
which does happen.
Right.
Most of them are, it's the wide roads that are the issue. Yeah.
And do some of them, I mean, I know you've heard you talk before about cross-country lines.
Mhm.
Do some people's sewer lines cross somebody else's property line?
Oh, there's quite
Like across somebody else's
Oh,
lawn?
there's
could be
quite a
their
few of
sewer
those.
line?
Yeah, there are some that run under people's garages.
Oh.
We've inherited quite a bit, which none of the counselors for decades had anything to do with, but before then, yes, there's some interesting situations out there, and there's no easements or anything. It's quite interesting. So this is something we need background on from all of our associates to explain this out as to the pros and the cons. You can figure out the pros and cons, I can, but what are the logistics of managing the system and what are the costs if we change this? Because they've never utilized this little section, they've always used the other one, which I understand because that would be, you can't just use one section of the ordinance, you gotta read it all together. And overall, it's the cost of the sewer, if the sewer has to be repaired or hooked into, to the sewer main is the responsibility of the property owner or the contractor or developer.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need more information on this from an expert to explain out what, beyond what we think are pros and cons as others here. That's how this whole thing started, and then we decided that we would update the 1970s ordinance. Seems like we should. On page 9-12, under D, these are all the materials that aren't supposed to be in the sewer system. And so I sort of had to chuckle because I copied this directly out of the other ordinances. And sure enough, everybody's run into what the town of Pittsfield's run into. In the sewer system, we have found in places where people didn't hook in properly, or there were issues, we found stone, gravel, concrete, paving, sticks, plaster, cement, mortar. So I put these in along with the other items that in the 70s had been listed. But where people have not hooked into properly, or the contractor hasn't finished it, or they put in rocks around the line so it broke through. Yeah, all of those items have been found in the sewer system.
Whole blood.
Yeah, oh yeah, I know. We don't even want to talk about that one.
Disgusting.
I think garbage would be a good backfill. It says garbage brown garbage.
Mhm. Yeah, I had to look up what Flushings were here in Flushings. I didn't change what was in there, I added in what others had that we didn't have, which turned out to be all items that had been in the sewer system at one time someplace. Stone, gravel, concrete, paving, sticks, plaster, cement, mortar, all these have been found here and there, where work was done. Sometimes the work was done by the town previously.
Well, I could see cement or mortar or something like that, like you're doing a little project and you don't think anything of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, this can happen.
Yeah.
Or your child gets a hold of some gravel and says, let's try the disposal out.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we can head off to the grease, oil, and sand on page 9-14. So of course, when different facilities, like car washes or bays for motor vehicles are hooked into the system, they have to have their proper interceptors, they have to have their proper setup under the plumbing code, and also for the sewer system. And places like Sterilogic have to have setups and everything. And that's all fine and that's worked out good. The issue we found is that there's nothing that requires them to maintain it and keep it up. So we have had issues where we have found a lot of sand that has caused trouble at our sewer pump station, and you believe you know where it comes from. However, the town had a little problem further down. That's our issue, so you can't prove who did what. So we have to be able to require the businesses that are hooked into the system to keep things up to date too. And so we've instructed them to do that by having no backing for it. And then, in case we need to do pre-treatment or some sort of monitoring or keep records because of certain chemicals that would go into the system, because our system's sensitive and we don't have a sewer treatment plant, luckily, because that would be very expensive. We have the lagoon system, so we need to keep it pristine so that when the sewerage is expelled or discharged into the river, it's clean. So I added a section in that would allow us to be able to make sure that the proper testing would be done, the proper installations and everything, and that the businesses would have to keep their monitoring up to date, their records and everything.
So the sewerage from Pittsfield just goes into the river?
It goes into the river, yeah. Once it goes down, it heads down in the big interceptors, which run across the airport property, Manson Park property, and it gets to the lagoons. It goes into, there's 2 lagoons, so it goes through one, it goes into the other, and then we discharge it once it builds up enough, and we try to discharge it before the rain comes so we don't go over our gallonage. We've learned that. And so when we discharge it, because it's gone through all these treatments and everything, which is natural, by the time it's expelled and it's tested, it's clean.
So like rocks or something, sand cleans it, or we don't add any chemicals?
We don't add anything. It just sits in the lagoon system and
Settles out?
yep.
Huh.
Yeah, I know, we have the largest lagoon system in the state of Maine. We have tours there and everything. And of course, interesting stories of other things that have taken place there. None of you were here when we had the hunters that were determined to go down to the sewage plant because the biggest birds were down there because they were having lots to eat. There are all kinds of interesting stories. We won't get into them. All right. So we've given the superintendent the authority to reject the waste if people don't keep items up so it's acceptable conditions for discharging, don't do their testing, go over the amount of discharge they should have. And I would think it would be rare, but if we had a large business move into town that had special types of waste that went into the sewer system and weren't filtered out previously, this could be an issue. We have had that before, but we've had to filter everything out.
So there must be something that you have to like pump out once in a while. There's gotta be people throw stuff in the sewers all the time.
Yeah.
So you must have to like excavate it out every once in a while.
There have been blockages because of what people do, and that's when things start backing up into people's houses if they don't have the proper backflow on. So it's closed off and can't get in. At the treatment plant, you know, there have been issues, but it's rare because the pipes are so big. But when there's a break, we all know. Unlike water, which can have a break on a road, a side road, and dump off into the grass, and you wouldn't see it for a while until you start having a volume problem, or it spurts into the road, up in the air. But sewage can get out. We've been fortunate here. We used to have a lot of problems. When I came, the first few weeks, we had sewage running down a road because there was no sewer system there. So we did a lot of projects when we got the USDA grant money and loan money for the sludge removal, and then it turned out there was hardly any sludge, so we could do lots of projects. So we fixed everything we could fix that had overflow and had problems. Before that, we had done some projects because there was sewage out on some roads. I won't mention the roads, but we took care of those once I got here and a little bit afterwards, and did them as budget projects. We did them ourselves without plans, but we got it taken care of because we had a very low budget. So we took care of the obvious things, and then we've done as much as we can until we have so much debt service, we haven't been able to do any more projects. Excuse me. So this talks about the grease, oil, and sand interceptors again. And again, I might have, you know, there might be items that need to be taken out by our associates, so I put everything I found in so we can take out. It's a lot easier to take it out than it is to insert it later on. So on page 9-16, this talks about straightening out the how the what the department is called, because it has public works running the sewer department. Then on page 9-16, under Article 7, protection from damage, this is very strange. Our ordinance has no unauthorized person shall maliciously, willfully, or neglectfully break or damage items. I mean, there would be no person that should do that. It doesn't mean they have to be unauthorized. That was a little different than the other ordinances. I left that there, but that was strange. So it says here that any person violating this provision will be subject to immediate arrest under disorderly conduct. I think it's more likely it's a malicious damage and trespassing and everything. So I changed that. That's something that we'll check into. Then we're all set here until we get to page 9-18, the end. And then this talks about the penalties and enforcement action to match this up with what's in the zoning ordinance. And even though items are called a separate violation each day, it's very rare that the judge in the court would ever award that each day as a separate violation. But I matched that up with the other ordinances. And then did leave a section. It would be rare for the town to ever get an injunction, but if we had somebody really damaging our sewer system, so it was getting into the lagoon and they wouldn't stop, and you know, you couldn't wait for your court date, you might have to go in to get an injunction. Just, you know, you never know. It would be rare. The next forms are the applications that we have for the private sewage disposal, for the residential or commercial and the industrial, and I left those alone. They work really well for the cases in which they're needed. And then the last page has that policy that I inserted into the actual ordinance. So this is everything I learned from all the other ordinances that I looked at that seemed relevant. However, I think there's some language that can be toned down, that maybe on the part where it talks about all the building things, maybe we don't need all that. So all of our associates is going over the ordinance now, but I wanted to get it to you so that you could review it, and they're very backed up on for it. And fortunately, they were able to work on the water terms and conditions, which is your next item. So we figured that was more important than getting this totally reviewed by them.
So Catherine, we're gonna have Oliver review this,
They
and then
will.
does it come back to us before having the legal review done?
It will be once all of our associates has time to go through it. We want Chris Pelletier, our plant manager, to go through it too. He has some strong opinions on things. So we'll have him go through and check everything. But he just didn't have the time to, sit down and review this. So I said I would consolidate everything so we had less cost per month from all of our associates. So I've been doing some of the paperwork, and this was one of the items. So I think we got some good bones, but it needs to be reviewed for technicality on how it actually works by engineers that manage a sewer system.
So this will come back to us after they've both reviewed it. We'll review that document, and then we'll approve it, send it to legal before it goes to the full council.
I think that we can probably, once they start making changes to it, I think I'm gonna send it to legal too. I think we just have really one point, it's where is the town gonna take up the responsibility for the sewer lines? Now, I think that's the issue we need to resolve.
Okay.
But the rest of this, if all of our associates, make some changes to some of the items or delete some items, and legal look through it, we'll have a document that is updated in good shape, like the other towns that updated their ordinances that had massive growth, like Camden and Jay, and there were several others. And it's still an understandable ordinance versus these larger ones here. So we'll get this back to you as soon as we can, but all of our associate schedule is very backed up. So the next one is our terms and conditions. This is much more technical. It did come from all of our associates. I haven't worked on a terms and conditions before, but I did go through and I understand what they're doing here. It seems like there's too many regulations, but there are so many issues under the PUC requirements in dealing with water that Annalise has tried to add some of those items in here. So you have the proposed one that says first revision. So this came from all of our associates. They do not have the redlining that you would have, like when you highlight with yellow and all of that. So I did go through our current one to try to figure out what changed. So it's been rewritten, things have been moved all around. It's been updated since the last time that we passed changes to the terms and conditions was in 2/12. It requires a public hearing, as well as the sewer ordinance does. The terms and conditions then requires the approval of the Public Utilities Commission, and it gets put in as a docket number, and then there's a hearing before a board and everything. So on this one, I think the easiest way to look at this is that I'll just go through and mention some items that have been added and subtracted from the prior one. Because I spent hours going through this, and we're not going to do that here. So the table of contents will be put together once Annalise is done with this, and Chris Pelletier goes through it. We had 2 meetings with Annalise to go over issues that were going on with the water system over the years, and she incorporated items here for us to look at. Some of the items I just think are excessive, but there needs to be more discussion on it. So the table of contents will come back to the document and be put in the front, just like these other ordinances, once we're done. The word customer was changed so it got updated, and I'm gonna read this off so you can see. It started out with the word customer means any person, business, or governmental entity who was, wanted to get service. So it adds on, this term also includes a person or business who was a customer of the same utility within the past 30 days and who requests services at the same or different location. And I think that this is being put in because of the situation with the people that move around and their bills don't go with them. Annalise added in the word establishment, the word main, the words limited service contract, and the words private line. She also added in, for the definition of service pipe, it was also service line. And then the other ones were the same. On page 2, under 1A, she added in the last sentence, if a new service connection or other work on the premises is required, the owner must authorize the utility to enter the premises to do the necessary work. It makes sense that that would be true, but some people want work done but refuse to let the employees go into the area to work. Under 2, seasonal customer, the last 2 sentences were changed. All right, and I see why. Seasonal water service and disconnection of seasonal water service will be by appointment only. Establishment of service normally begins after April 1st, and disconnection of service will normally be no later than December 31st of each year. This is to address the situations in which we actually have had people leave for winter and not turn off their water system, and then there's a big problem, and their neighbors come in with the keys, and we have to head over and everything to try to straighten it out. I think that this is to put some teeth in here, that things need to be disconnected between certain periods of time and not wait till after, until January and February, which we can advertise better.
Does this help keep it in the same calendar year as well because of the billing that's done, or does that not
You would
matter?
think so, but no, because the billing gets done so much later than the readings anyway. All right, there's, in this next item, I'm gonna ask Annalise about this, but it says billing procedures. It says minimum charges for metered service shall be billed quarterly in advance. Nothing's done in advance, it's after the fact, because then we have the readings and the service has taken place. So I thought that was interesting, that's already in there.
It'd be a good way to make sure the bills are paid and nobody would be able to get behind.
No, this is true. So that's interesting, this whole billing is being looked at by us, how to do that, because it's just so much work, month after month after month. So is there a way, now that we're caught up, to be able to push them all to be read so that you're doing them like quarterly and everybody's done, or at least cut out a few months to save time. So that's something that we're looking at now. Under seasonal customer, okay, we did that one. We're down and looked at the advances. In the 3rd paragraph under billing procedures, it says public and private fire protection charges are billed quarterly in advance. They're actually not, but could be. It says the sentence that was added on says the utility reserves the right to render bills monthly in arrears or advance at its discretion. I don't think we want to do it monthly. On the next page, under credit and collection procedures, C has, all right, there's a B missing, but C, where C is in the next paragraph, this was all added on. Annalise has added in the due date must be no less than 25 days after the bill is mailed, and ours say 30 days generally. They used to say 2 months. So I think that the law now indicates no less than 25 days, so she's put that in. After the bill is mailed, hand delivered, or electronically mailed to the customer. All right, and she's added in, a bill is considered mailed on the date it is postmarked, but normally that would be true. If there is no postmark, the utility should date the bill and mail it on or before the date on the bill. And then the late payment charges, that language was added on. And it wouldn't be any more than what the maximum is allowed. That's just like taxes, you can't go any higher. Number 5, disconnection procedures is different language in its entirety. And I think this matches up with what the PUC requirements have. She increased the charges under 6 for the disconnection for C, assess against the property owner a collection fee of $116, now it's $100. And she added on F, file a lien authorized by Title 35A. This is new since 2012, and the reason why we do the certificates of water and sewer users. And then once I get this resolved, that I picked up the right things, we might be able to mark this up for you. But right now, I just had marked it yellow because Oliver Associates doesn't use those tools.
Catherine, the late fee or the collection fee,
Mm-hmm.
this says $116, that's the updated amount?
That's the updated amount.
And is this a fee that we are setting? It says, as set forth in section 7.
It's supposed to be our cost, so she did a checking into the cost to do items. So it's supposed to be our cost.
It's not like through an order that changes from year to
No,
year.
no.
It would just be, so is our cost calculated as like man hours in order to process it?
Mm-hmm.
And given our salaries change from year to year,
Mhm.
so wouldn't that also change from year to year? And this would kind of box us into having a particular fee.
I think we have to say a fee here, like in the other sections, we can't use like it by order of the town council, because any word that's changed here, you have to go back to the PUC.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if we want to have a particular dollar amount there, given the fact that, all of our staffing costs increase by 3% every year, that this kind of boxes into having that.
Okay, I'll ask about that, yeah, okay.
Maybe you can include a percentage increase each year or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point, I'll ask about that. Because that's sort of the same thing throughout, you have to list the price and stick with it. I don't think we can put in a percentage increase, but I'll check on that.
PUC's pretty strict.
Very strict. All right, on page 4, under 7, charges for restoration, reconnection of service. Annalise has added in the reasons why there would be disconnection. Those weren't in there before, we just followed the state law. The reasons include but are not limited to disconnection for non-payment of bills, this is the usual item, violation of these terms and conditions, fraudulent use of water, dangerous conditions on the customer's premises, violation of the commission's rules, or disconnection or restoration, restoring at the customer's request. So generally it's due to non-payment of bills, and of course, as you know, all year there's been no disconnections because of COVID-19. There's no disconnections during the winter either. Violation of these terms and conditions is when somebody destroys the meters and hooks things up themselves and has, quite a problem going on. I only remember one of these. Fraudulent use of water, yes, we have had people connect themselves up to other people, so that would fit under that term. Dangerous conditions on the customer's premise, we've only had one of those, which was dangerous in how they hook things up and almost burn down their house. But generally, it's for non-payment. And then the fee got up to $40 and $80. And then the last few sentences were added on. Each customer can have one normal business hour reconnection fee waived per 5-year period due to an emergency situation, which includes but is not limited to a water leak or a broken fixture. After that, all fees must be paid in full. This will only apply to the restoration reconnection charge during normal business hours. So this is something Annalise wanted to be put in. Chris and I weren't really impressed with this, because this would mean that the staff would have to track who had the restoration fee and had the free one. And I suspect some people would want to have this quite a bit due to their condition of their plumbing. So I'm not sure how this can be handled administratively and actually work effectively. In 8, the fees were increased to 40 and 80. And then under collection trip fee, Annalise added in the last sentence, the fee for 23 went up from 20. Annalise put in the utility reserves the right to waive one collection trip fee per customer per every 5 years. Again, it's how do you track all that? Terms of payment, I didn't think this was necessary, but the law does indicate if the payment falls on a Saturday, Sunday, legal holiday, or any other day when the office isn't open, the due date is extended to the next business day. That's just common sense, and that's what's done with the tax bills, and that's what we do with the water and sewer bills. Annalise did add in at the bottom in the last 4 or 5 lines, it is the customer's responsibility to provide correct billing addresses. And that is a good item to add in, because people will move around and landlords will move, and we won't, the mail doesn't always get forwarded. And people should be responsible to tell the town office and all of their services that they've moved. And then, obviously, failure to receive a bill does not relieve the customer of the obligation of payment. The next area that Annalise changed was number 11, charge for return checks. And Annalise was convinced, the law says we can only charge $5 per account. Well, the town has been charging the $25 that we've been charged by the bank for over a decade. And it was in our regulations, you just charge what the bank charges. So I have a question mark by this one. $5 doesn't do anything. That's not what the bank charges.
No, a lot of banks now are $35 or $40.
Yes, I know.
Yes, I accidentally had one go through and it was 36. I was like, I have to move money from the savings to the checking.
We feel so bad. People will put through their $10 and $20 checks for the recreation fees.
And then you get charged
They get charged $35.
$35.
Yeah.
A lot of times the banks can be like, if you call them, I made a mistake. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, we'll give you one. But sometimes.
So in this section, the $40 and $80 again were increased. And then in simple places where it says chapter 620 on our copy all the way through, and Annalise says chapter 62, so I was gonna check that out. Going on to number 14 on page 6. Of course, no person can tamper with utility property, and you're not supposed to. Annalise added on in the 3rd sentence after otherwise operated, modified or removed by persons other than those authorized by the utility. So she has something in mind about how people would modify their utility setup. The next item that was updated is 17, service interruption. The last 2 sentences were added that notice will be given at least 24 hours in advance of the interruption of service for planned shutoffs. The town's been using 5 or 7 days, but I guess this is just in case. This is what the law requires, so she put that in there. We usually deliver the notices as best as we can, with the exception of the emergency fire flow that had to be done at a facility here in town, out by Waverly. That was just 24 hours, but normally we have 5 to 7 days. 18 metering is all redone, and it talks about the cost of the 5/8 inch meters. I'm wondering what's going on out there. There shouldn't be anyone in here. So she's added in language about the meters and the fact that the larger ones, okay, this may be beyond the fact that the larger ones are supposed to be paid for by the customer. If somebody wants the 3/4 or the 1.5 or the 2 or 3. And then the next few pages are all different language. There's all new for page 7 on A, meter location, single family residential. Our prior regulations just had like one little paragraph. And 19 new meter or service fees. This is where I'm sure where it refers back to the section I just mentioned when Annalise put in about the 5/8 meters. Anything larger than a 5/8 meter is basically not really a residential, or it's a residential that has quite a lot of activity going on, maybe an apartment complex, or some other issue why they need that much. So Annalise put in, since most towns and districts have an inspection cost and they have that one pay for the meter, my idea was usually the commercial pays, commercial and industrial will pay for their meter because it's bigger meters. So that's something we can look at and talk about. On page 8, 20, charges for repair or replacement of damaged water meters. The fees went up again. Well, they match up with the other fees throughout. Then going on to page 9. The backflow prevention device testing 25 was reworded. And I think this has to do with the fact that people will test their backflow preventers, but not give the town a copy. And so this is something that we need to work out better. Some places send us the copies each time with no issue. Under number 27, on the direct pressure water devices and systems by automatic feed valves. This is not something we have much, but Annalise added on, the utility is not liable for any damage resulting from the lack of or failure of these devices. Page 10, number 30, fire hydrants. Annalise has added in the second sentence, in the case of training exercises, notification shall be made to the utility prior to and immediately after completion. So these would be training exercises generally by the fire department, just so that the utility will know what's going on. Under 33, bulk water sales and swimming pools, the fee was increased to $50. Then on page 11, the whole section was rewritten on number 36, location of meters for apartments, commercial buildings, mobile homes, and farms. It was updated so there were different categories. We had everything all together in a paragraph. There's a lot more language here. It breaks it up so you've got apartments, duplexes, condos, and commercial buildings. You've got a category for mobile home parks, although that was covered in another section. Multi-unit developments, campgrounds, and RV parks, although we don't have those, you could have them at some point. Number 37, meter pits and valves. I believe that was new. I'd have to check on that. And we're almost at the end here. A new section was put in on page 13 about plan reviews. And this would be covered for the town under our subdivision and site plan ordinance. If there's a site plan review, we just had one that took place for technical review. The town did receive the cost of the services that we provided to have items looked over. And that's been in the site plan review ordinance since the 80s. So this is now in the terms and conditions are proposed as such, but it would have been covered under the site plan review. Service lines and meters, the next one, that is completely rewritten, I believe, to match up with the state law, but I have a question mark by it, because there is a lot of new language there. And this is the part, it talks about the curb stop shall normally be located at the limit of the public way. The utility will be responsible for all service lines within the limits of the highway. This just makes it clearer. It talks about crossings. So this would be a technical one that, I've got like 4 question mark ones that Annalise would explain. On page 14, a new section was put in for the remote reading registers. I'm not sure, I think that's a good idea, but that's something we can talk about. The fees were updated at the bottom of the page. I'm really curious as to what is going on upstairs. On page 15, water abatements. We have a section now, which is not this defined. This provides a bit more language and sets a time period, and also puts in that an abatement will not exceed the lesser of $200 or half the difference between the bill in question. And previously it was just, you couldn't go any more than 50%. So those are the major items. Annalise can come in and talk to the committee or to the full council. I think probably the full council might be good to talk about this, because it is extremely technical. I had to read it several times before I marked it up. But it definitely is time for an update. The PUC rules have changed a bit since 2012.
Both of these need public hearings, correct?
Yes, yes.
And then after the public hearing, it goes to the PUC?
Only the terms and conditions for water will go. The sewer ordinances with it is just like your other ordinances, like subdivision site plans.
And so if we have a public hearing, we approve a document, we send it to the PUC,
Yes.
and then they have issues with it and send it back, do we then need to have additional public hearings before making changes? Or would we just make changes based on recommendations from the PUC?
The last time we had some changes, but they were extremely minor. If it was something major, I would think we'd have to have another public hearing. But minor technical issues, putting the wrong chapter number in. We had a few of those things last time. And we did this ourselves last time, and we did it with the help of a pollution control a lawyer that was at the town's firm at that time. They provided those services. We did it ourselves. They checked it over and fixed it for us.
And we're looking to have all of these documents changed at the same public hearing in order to mitigate costs.
I would think that that would be the best thing. That way everybody can come at once. People that would be interested in water would be interested in sewer, I would think. So it would be good to do them both at the same time. The little waste one can tag along.
And do we want to look at doing this in January after we get all of our budgeting and the public hearings for that and the workshops and everything else done out of the way, and then tackle this having final documents for a public hearing in January?
It may take that long to get this to the stage, because this is just draft 1,
Right.
Which took quite a bit of time to put together. We need other people to go through it. I mean, things might go pretty smoothly, and you might be able to do it sooner, but January might be a Jen, I'm really wondering what's going on out there.
We also have a department that's working through their budget at the same time as they're trying to do this, so.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's personally, I don't think there's anything in here that is of such an urgent nature that we need to do anything, with this before January or February, just to be able to get the other things out of the way before we kind of tackle this.
I know Annalisa said that to her, this is not that complicated, so she might be able to, you know, now that she's got some of the other projects going along pretty well, she may be able to go through this and with Chris agree on what's should be in here so that we get an updated copy and then meet with us, and we may want to go forward or we may not. So I think we play it by ear.
Okay.
Understanding it's likely it'll end up in January, but it also, you'd have changing counselors who'd have to learn all of this too, so.
Well, the rest of the council hasn't seen this yet either, so, I think that they would be in the same position,
They probably
as
won't
anybody
wanna
else
see
coming
it.
in, so.
I think.
Yes, you're here.
Yeah, I feel like we have, at least one meeting, a week right now already scheduled through the end of the year until we get through the budget process. And then if we wanna add, then we have the regular agenda items to deal with, and then adding on reviewing of this, having Annalise present and,
I think I've
public
done,
hearings.
yeah, I think I've done really well cutting back the agenda items. You remember that we used to always have a lot. We figured out the best way to make less, but you still need to see certain items no matter what because of just oversight and for state law and town regulations. But I have been able to cut back the agenda items significantly with a lot of effort here. So we'll just see. Maybe it will work out. Maybe you'll want to do one of them. We'll just take it as we go along.
Okay, yep. I lost my agenda here. Okay. Any other questions or discussion, counselors, about either the sewer use ordinance or the water, terms and conditions before we move on? No. We have several items on hold, with the planning board, the zoning ordinance, houses, temporary signs, road system adequacy. I believe that's a study that they were gonna look at, or for the, subdivisions. And then the sludge management, I thought they decided not to do anything with that.
Well, they haven't reported back yet.
Okay.
Yeah, what's taking place upstairs, instead of tomorrow, evidently they started putting the permanent glass in. That's what's going on.
Oh, okay.
Once I heard the mechanical device, okay.
Okay, and then, new business, other ordinances or ordinance amendments, that was the waterworks that we did.
Yes, yes.
I was wondering why it wasn't up where we were.
That was a surprise for you, because I just didn't think you were gonna get it in time for the meeting, but it whipped right in here, and then I had to read it a few times.
Right, set next meeting date if necessary. Is that gonna be kind of in flux based on when we get the reviews back from
I believe
Oliver?
so, yes.
Okay, so we'll wait on that, and see where we end up with that. So-
Yeah, at least we got it going here,
Yeah.
cause they were
Good start.
complicated items here.
Yeah. Alright, so, anything else, counselors? Are we ready for an adjournment? For a motion?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Alright, we're adjourned. Thank you,
that's
everybody.
enough
Thank you,
on
Catherine,
that.
for putting all that extra effort into, taking the first stab at those documents.
You're welcome, I'm glad to get them moving along here.
Matt, do you wanna sign off on the, and Amanda, do you wanna sign these or?
Sure, since I'm here.